A millionaire walked into Judge Judy's courtroom wearing a smirk worth $1,000,000, but it took only 10 seconds for that smirk to die. The moment Judge Judy lifted a file he didn't even know existed, his confidence cracked, his lies unraveled, and his entire empire of arrogance started collapsing on camera. This wasn't a case. This was the downfall of a man who thought the truth would never catch him. And he will be shocked when Judge Judy reveals what's coming next, because the real explosion hasn't even started yet. But before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Don't forget the subscribe button. The camera pans across the room, catching the plaintiff first, a small business owner with tired eyes and a folder clutched so tightly the edges bend. His breathing is shallow, almost silent. He does not look at the defendant. He looks at the floor, as if the truth he carried might slip out of his hands if he met that smirk head on. Judge Judy sits perfectly still. Her eyes move, not her head, not her shoulders, just her eyes, tracking the man as he leans back in his chair like he owns the bench, the cameras, the case, and every second of everyone else's time. The fluorescent lights above him flicker slightly, and in the brief shift of brightness, his arrogance seems to shine even sharper. He tilts his chin toward the plaintiff, then toward Judy, signaling a quiet message. This is beneath me. He has said nothing yet, but entitlement has its own language. The courtroom feels it. The plaintiff feels it, and Judge Judy certainly feels it. The plaintiff clears his throat softly, trying to begin. Your Honor, The defendant laughs under his breath, not loud, not obvious, but intentional, the kind of laugh that bruises confidence without needing volume. The plaintiff's voice falters, his fingers twitch against the folder. The sound reaches Judy. Her gaze lifts, not abrupt, not dramatic, just a slow, surgical rise. A practiced movement, the kind that stops people mid-lie without a single word spoken. The cameras catch the shift immediately, zooming close on her eyes as the room tightens around them. The defendant doesn't notice the shift. Not yet. He straightens his cuffs as if adjusting the case itself, and he smiles again, this time wider. A rehearsed smile, the kind that belongs on billboards or charity galas, not in a small courtroom where truth waits on every breath. The plaintiff tries again. He refused to pay me for another interruption. This time, the defendant lifts a hand slowly, as if silencing an assistant. Your Honor, he says, finally speaking, before we let him ramble. The word ramble hits the plaintiff like a shove. Judge Judy's posture does not change, but the air changes. Quietly, she places both hands flat on the desk. Her fingers do not move. The room goes still in response, like a ripple settling on a lake. Even the bailiff glances up, sensing the temperature drop. Her voice arrives low and even. I did not give you permission to speak. A single sentence, no edge, no volume. But the smirk falters, barely, but enough. The defendant blinks, confused by the absence of fear in her tone. He expected irritation, maybe anger, something loud he could argue with. He did not expect calm. Calm unnerves men like him. Calm tells them the ground beneath their feet has already shifted. Judge Judy leans forward slightly, eyes never leaving his. And I strongly recommend, she says, that you do not mistake this courtroom for one of your boardrooms. The plaintiff looks up, hope flickers for the first time. The defendant opens his mouth and stops, because Judy is still watching him, silently, steadily, unblinking, and in that silence, something breaks. Not loudly, but the story has begun. The defendant adjusts his suit again, this time with shaking fingers, just as Judy slides a file toward her and says, Let us start with the truth you keep avoiding. The gavel has not moved, but the tension has. It hangs in the air like a held breath, stretched thin between arrogance and consequence, and the defendant, still clinging to his shaken confidence, decides to push back. He leans forward now, abandoning the lazy sprawl he wore moments earlier. The camera catches the shift, shoulders tight, jaw set, eyes locked on Judge Judy as if preparing for a duel he believes he cannot lose. Entitled men often mistake defiance for strength. Your Honor, he says, voice lifted just enough to reclaim the room. If you would allow me to speak without interruption. Judy raises a single eyebrow. The room inhales sharply. He does not notice. He presses on. I am the one being wronged here, he continues, gesturing broadly toward the plaintiff. This entire thing is an attempt to squeeze money from me. I have been nothing but generous. He should be thanking me, not dragging me here with baseless accusations. The words roll off his tongue with the smoothness of someone who has rehearsed them, not for the court, but for himself. Self-justification makes a comfortable script. The plaintiff does not interrupt. He cannot. His hands are folded tight over that same bent-edged folder, knuckles white, breath uneven. He listens as the defendant paints him as small, ungrateful, invisible. Judge Judy studies both men. Her expression remains unreadable, a calm surface hiding deep waters. The lights above flicker again, catching a glint in her eyes. Generous? She repeats quietly. The defendant mistakes the tone for agreement. He nods eagerly. Yes, generous. I helped him. I gave him opportunities he would not have had otherwise. And now he's manufacturing this sob story to attack my character. He says the word character with a flourish, as if it is a luxury item from one of his properties. Judy's fingers tap the desk once. The sound is soft, but it slices through the air like a blade. She turns to the plaintiff. Tell me exactly what you did for him. The plaintiff swallows. His voice is thin at first, but steady. I built the product he ordered. I redesigned it 3 times because he kept changing his mind. I delivered it on schedule, and then he refused to pay. The defendant snorts, a sharp, disrespectful sound. Because he did not deliver what I asked for. He failed. I do not reward failure. He leans back again, confidence rebuilding piece by piece, convinced he has retaken control. But Judy watches him like someone studying an animal that has not yet realized it is in a cage. Her voice stays calm. You say he failed. Show me the part of your agreement he did not meet. The defendant hesitates, just for a breath. But breath is enough. He reaches for his briefcase, pulling out neatly stacked papers, too neatly, as if curated for effect. He flips through them loudly, trying to sound authoritative. The performance matters to him. The illusion of competence is the scaffolding holding up his ego. He slides the papers toward Judy with a flourish. Everything is there. She does not touch them yet. Instead, she asks, "And why did you speak over him? Twice?" He stiffens. Because he was rambling? Judy's eyes narrow, the temperature of the room dropping 1 degree with each passing second. No, she says softly. He was answering my question. Silence, not empty, sharp. The audience feels it. Even the cameras stop adjusting. The defendant's smirk flickers again. Then Judy lifts the papers, scanning the first page. Her lips press into a thin line, a line the defendant does not see, but the plaintiff does, and hope flickers again. Judy looks up slowly, eyes cold and precise. This contract of yours does not say what you think it says. The moment hangs between them, Judy's words floating in the air like a verdict not yet spoken. The defendant straightens in his chair, confusion flickering across his polished confidence, and for the first time, the golden armor he wears begins to show its first hairline crack. Judy lowers her eyes back to the contract. The camera zooms in over her shoulder. Catching the tiny details, the uneven spacing of the lines, the faint differences in font weight, the subtle indentation that should not be there, little inconsistencies that Arrogance assumed no one would notice. She turns the page slowly, deliberately. The sound of paper sliding echoes just enough to make the defendant swallow. I am not sure, Judy says, her voice level, that you read this as carefully as you believe you did. The defendant forces a laugh. Too light, too rehearsed. Your Honor, with all due respect, stop. One word. The courtroom freezes. Judy's eyes rise, narrowing slightly. Do not hide behind that phrase. It is what people say when they intend the opposite. The defendant inhales sharply. His jaw shifts. He looks down at his hands, then at the plaintiff, grasping for an anchor that is no longer there. The plaintiff watches quietly, a mix of fear and vindication swirling in his expression. His fingertips trace the bent edge of his folder, grounding himself in the truth he has carried for weeks. Judy lifts the contract again. According to your own documentation, you made 3 revisions after the final agreement was already signed. 3. And each one required additional labor on his part. She glances at the plaintiff. correct? He nods. Yes, Your Honor. He kept changing what he wanted, but he never agreed to pay for the extra work. The defendant rolls his eyes, a reflex of entitlement. Because the extra work was fixing his mistakes. Judy tilts her head slightly. Is that what this line indicates? She taps her finger on a sentence highlighted by fate more than ink. A sentence you added. One that contradicts your previous statements. The defendant blinks. No, that is not. Perhaps the printing company. Judy interrupts without raising her voice. You are telling me a printing company rewrote your contract? His lips part, but no words follow. His tongue presses against the back of his teeth, searching for a lie that can stand up on its own weight. None appear. A murmur travels through the audience, soft, electric, inevitable. The camera cuts to the plaintiff. His eyes widen, a quiet breath escaping him. For the first time, he looks at the defendant directly, really looks, and the fear that once kept him silent begins to unravel. Judy places the contract flat on her desk. Let me be clear, she says, tone calm but edged with precision. If you altered this document after the agreement was signed, your entire defense becomes meaningless. The defendant's face tightens. His fingers twitch. He shifts in his seat as if the chair suddenly grew smaller beneath him. You are misunderstanding what happened, he mutters. Judy leans forward, eyes steady. No, I'm reading what happened. Silence again. Heavy, exposing. The defendant draws in a shaky breath. This is being blown out of proportion. The plaintiff finally speaks, not loud, not confrontational, but steady. It was blown out of proportion the moment you refused to pay me. The defendant's head snaps in his direction. The smirk he once wore has thinned into something brittle. Judy touches the corner of the contract, ready to turn another page. She lifts it halfway, glances at the defendant, and says, Then explain why this next page contradicts every word you have just said. The page hovers between Judy's fingers, held just high enough for the defendant to see, but not high enough for him to escape. His eyes lock onto the edge of that paper, the way a cornered animal watches the shadow of a closing door. And the courtroom feels it. Something dangerous is about to surface. Judy lowers the page slowly, letting it fall open across her desk. The camera catches the exact moment her gaze sharpens, as if a silent truth has risen from the ink itself. She studies the line, her expression unreadable. Too calm, too controlled. The defendant clears his throat. Your Honor, before you judge that page, I need to explain. You will explain, Judy replies, after I finish reading the words you wrote. He freezes, a tiny, involuntary flinch. The first, real break. The plaintiff leans forward slightly. The folder in his lap sits open now, the papers inside trembling with the movement of his hands. But for the first time, his fear is mixed with something else. Recognition. Judy has found what he suspected, but could never prove. The room tightens around the silence. Judy taps her finger on the line in question. This, she says quietly, states that you agreed to the additional redesign in writing. The defendant's lips part. His head tilts, searching for an argument. No, that's not correct. That line was signed by you. She rotates the page, facing it toward him like a mirror. His confidence collapses inward, not dramatically, not quickly, just enough that the corners of his facade crumble. His pupils dart across the page, hunting for an escape route that simply does not exist. I do not recall signing that version, he mutters. Judy nods slowly. I am sure you do not. She flips the next page. The sound, soft, final, lands like a verdict. This version, she continues, shows the original language, no mention of an additional redesign. And the signature on this page matches the plaintiff's file. She glances toward the plaintiff. Does it not? He nods again. Yes, Your Honor. That is the version we agreed to. The defendant straightens, heat rising beneath his carefully curated exterior. Someone must have altered my copy. Someone, Judy repeats. Who? The printing company again? A ripple of quiet laughter touches the audience, quickly stifled. The defendant's face reddens. He gestures wildly toward the documents. This is clearly a mix-up. I would never. Judy lifts a hand. He stops mid-sentence. There is no mix-up here, she says. There is a story you rehearsed, And then there are the facts you hoped no one would check. The defendant's throat tightens. You are twisting this. No, she replies. I am untwisting it. The plaintiff exhales shakily, emotion gathering behind his eyes. The defendant tries again, desperation leaking through his tone. You are not understanding my intentions. Judy leans forward, voice cutting through his excuse like a blade through silk. Your intentions are written on this page, and what they reveal is not generosity. It is deception. The room falls silent. Electric. Unavoidable. The defendant presses his palms against the desk, steadying himself as if the truth has tilted the world beneath him. Judy closes the file halfway, her gaze sharp. So let me be very clear, she says. This contradiction is only the beginning. She snaps the file shut and slides another document forward. Because what I'm about to show you next, she adds, changes everything. The file she slides forward lands with a soft thud, quiet, almost gentle, yet somehow louder than any accusation. The defendant's eyes follow it, the way a drowning man watches the edge of a lifeboat drift just out of reach. Pressure leaks into the room, subtle at first, then undeniable. Judge Judy does not speak right away. Silence becomes the interrogation. The defendant shifts in his seat, rolling his shoulders back as if trying to rebuild the armor that cracked open a moment ago. His fingers drum the table, fast, uneven, betraying the panic he tries to hide. Your Honor, he says suddenly, voice louder than necessary. Before we continue, I need to clarify something important. Judy does not look up. She turns a page in the new file. The page turn alone answers him. Wait. He does not wait. I have been patient and respectful, he insists, gesturing toward the plaintiff. But I cannot allow him to manipulate this court. He is exaggerating. No, he is outright lying about our agreement. I did everything by the book. Judy lifts her gaze slowly. By which book? The one you altered or the one you signed? The audience reacts. A soft gasp here, a shifting chair there. The defendant's jaw tightens. Your Honor, I'm a respected businessman, he says, straightening his cuffs again, a habit born from vanity rather than nerves. I run multiple companies, manage large teams, and I do not have time for petty accusations. The plaintiff exhales, frustration trembling in his voice. Petty? You left me with months of unpaid work. You promised the payment. You praised the design. Then you ignored every message I sent. The defendant snaps his head toward him. Because you did not deliver what I ordered. You are acting like a victim when... Judy's hand rises. He stops. Let me help you, she says, her tone calm, almost soft, but dangerously so. You want me to believe that your time is valuable, but his time is disposable, that your promise matters but his labor does not, that your signature is binding only when it benefits you. Her gaze cuts straight through him. That is not how this works. The defendant swallows hard. I'm telling the truth. Are you? She slides the newest document toward him. The camera zooms in as he recognizes it. A receipt. One of his receipts. Except it does not match the others he handed in earlier. His breath stutters. Judy taps her finger on the top corner. 2 receipts. Same purchase date, same description, different totals. She tilts her head. Which one should I believe? The defendant's face flushes a deep red. He tries to speak, but the words come tangled. That must be, maybe the system printed duplicates? Your system, Judy asks, or your ego? Another murmur sweeps through the room. The plaintiff watches, stunned, as the defendant begins losing control of his own narrative. The defendant shifts again, leaning forward aggressively. This is a witch hunt. He is using emotional manipulation to distract from his incompetence. Judy's voice arrives like a cold wind. The only distraction here is your story unraveling. The defendant's breath shortens. His fingers grip the edge of the desk as if it is the only stable thing left. Judy reaches for another sheet. We are just beginning. She lifts the next page, another flawed document, and says, now explain why these numbers do not match either. The new page rests between Judy's fingers like a verdict waiting to rise. The defendant watches it with the dread of someone who already knows what it contains. And when she finally lifts it, the room seems to lean in with her. The lights overhead hum softly, steady, impartial, unforgiving. Judy reviews the document in silence, each second stretching into something sharp. This, she says finally, is your third version of the same receipt. 3. The number lands like a weight. The defendant's eyes widen before he catches himself, smoothing his expression into something he hopes resembles composure. But the crack in his armor has widened, and now everything, breath, posture, tone, betrays him. "That is not possible," he says too quickly. "I would not create multiple receipts. My assistants must have pulled the wrong files." The plaintiff shakes his head gently, his voice barely above a whisper. "You sent all 3 yourself." The defendant turns on him, fury flashing through him like a spark desperate to become fire. "You do not know what I—" "Do not raise your voice," Judy cuts in. Her tone is low, steady, and absolute, power in its purest form. The defendant clamps his jaw shut, nostrils flaring. Judy sets the receipts side by side. 3 columns of mismatched numbers, inconsistent totals, shifting dates as if truth itself were trying to escape the page. "Tell me," she says, "which version is the truth?" He opens his mouth, closes it, breathes. "I have been very clear," he says finally, leaning in, voice trembling between anger and desperation. "This project was a disaster. He overcharged me. He botched the design. These changes, these receipts, they reflect the corrections I had to request." "So you adjusted the numbers yourself?" Judy asks. He freezes, just for an instant, but an instant is enough. No, that's not what You just said the receipts reflect your adjustments," Judy replies. "Either you altered them or you instructed someone to." The defendant tries to backpedal. "That is not what I meant. You are twisting my words." "No," she says, "I am listening to them." The plaintiff watches him closely now, the fear in his posture melting into something steadier, strength born from validation. "Your Honor," he says softly, He told me not to question his numbers. He said he knew how to work the system. I did not understand what he meant until now." The defendant snaps. "You are lying!" Judy turns her full gaze on him. His breath catches. "Enough," she says. "Your receipts are inconsistent, your contract versions contradict each other, and your explanations shift every time you speak." Her hand slides to a 4th document beneath her desk. The defendant stiffens. He recognizes the shape of it before the content. Another receipt, another version, another lie. "Let me ask you something," Judy says, leaning forward. "Which part of this story do you expect me to believe? The numbers that change? The signatures that do not match? The stories that collapse under the weight of their own arrogance?" The defendant tries to form a reply, but his throat works soundlessly. Judy folds her hands. "You forged something," she says calmly. "The question is what?" The room goes still, so still that even the cameras seem to pause. The defendant swallows, sweat glistening at his temple. I did not," Judy interrupts softly, almost gently. "Then tell me, who forged these?" She pushes the 4 receipts toward him in a neat, devastating row, numbers gleaming under the courtroom lights, each one contradicting the last. "If you were sitting in that courtroom, what would you do? Stay silent or speak up?" The 4 receipts lie in a perfect row, aligned edge to edge, glowing under the courtroom lights like evidence laid out on a surgeon's table. The defendant stares at them, but his eyes keep darting away, as if the truth burns to look at directly. And for the first time, fear outweighs confidence. He shifts in his seat again, not the calculated shift of a man asserting status. This movement is tight, involuntary, cornered. His fingers flex, restless. His breath shortens into small, uneven pulls. The camera zooms in, catching every microfracture of a man trying and failing to hold his world together. Judge Judy sits still, hands folded with deliberate calm. Her composure creates pressure more effectively than any raised voice ever could. "These receipts," she says softly, "cannot all be true." The defendant swallows, dragging his gaze up from the documents. "Your Honor," he begins, "there must be some misunderstanding. The plaintiff is clearly—" "Stop talking about him," she interrupts. "Start talking about you." The words hit like a slap. Quiet, controlled, humiliating. A ripple passes through the audience. Shoulders shift, breaths pause, eyes widen with anticipation. Even the bailiff leans slightly forward, sensing the descent of a man who thought he stood above consequence. The plaintiff sits straighter now, his hands unclenched from the folder he has been holding for nearly an hour. Strength begins to replace the fear inside him. For once, the room listens to him without interruption, even in silence. The defendant, cornered, reaches for the safest weapon in his arsenal, anger. "This is absurd," he snaps, rising halfway out of his chair. "I have run companies for years. I'm a respected figure. I do not need to forge anything. Sit down," Judy says, not loud, not sharp, just final. He sits, because there is nowhere else to go. Judy lifts one of the receipts between two fingers. The camera tilts with her, catching the tremble in the defendant's exhale. "Do you know," she says, "what people do when they panic? They overcorrect. They change too much. They leave fingerprints on their lies." She places the receipt back down. "And you," she continues, "have left fingerprints everywhere." The defendant's breath stutters. Sweat begins to gather near his hairline. His confidence drains like sand through open fingers. He glances at the plaintiff, quickly, sharply, as if searching for someone weaker to blame. But the plaintiff does not look away. Not this time. His voice arrives steady, almost gentle. "You told me your numbers were flexible, that I should not worry about the math, but I did worry." "Because nothing ever matched." The defendant blows out a frustrated breath. "You misunderstood." "No," Judy says. "He paid attention." The audience murmurs again, this time louder, unable to contain the rising wave of anticipation. Judy leans slightly forward. "Clerk," she says, without looking away from the defendant, "bring in the supplemental evidence we received this morning." A hush falls across the room. The clerk disappears through the side door. The defendant's face drains of color. His lips tighten. His posture collapses inward. He knows something is coming, something he hoped would never surface, something he prayed they would not find. The door opens again. The clerk carries a small folder, thin but dangerous. He sets it on Judy's desk. Judy rests her hand on top of it. She looks up at the defendant and says, "You know what is inside this folder, do you not?" The folder sits beneath Judy's hand like a silent threat, thin, unassuming, but heavy with implication. The defendant's eyes fix on it, wide and unblinking, as if the cardboard alone could swallow him whole. Even the air changes, turning sharper, colder, as though the room itself senses the truth trapped inside. Judy does not open it right away. She lets the silence breathe first. The camera sweeps slowly across the courtroom, faces tense, bodies leaned forward, anticipation drawn tight as violin strings. The plaintiff sits motionless, gripping the edges of his seat. His fear has cooled into something firmer, quieter, a kind of resolve. Only the defendant cannot stay still. His foot taps once beneath the desk, a nervous rhythm trying to outrun reality. "Your Honor," he says, voice pitched slightly higher, "before you consider whatever is in that folder, I think it is important to address the plaintiff's—" Judy raises a hand. He stops instantly. She pulls the folder toward her with two fingers. "This," she says, "was submitted by a third party, someone who heard about today's case and believed the information inside might be relevant." A ripple travels through the room, quick, electric, unstoppable. The defendant's face shifts, first confusion, then recognition, then panic hiding beneath forced composure. "A third party?" he repeats, voice cracking on the second word. "Who would even—" Judy opens the folder. The sound is quiet, too quiet. The courtroom freezes, as if noise might break the moment open too soon. Inside is a single USB drive and a short printed statement. Judy slides the statement out, scanning it. Her lips tighten, not with anger, but with certainty. She nods toward the bailiff. "Play the recording, please." The defendant's hand shoots up. "Your Honor, I object." "On what grounds?" she asks without looking at him. He hesitates. His mouth opens, but nothing comes out. Because there are no grounds. Because truth does not need permission. The bailiff inserts the USB into the courtroom monitor. A screen flashes to life. The video begins, grainy, obviously recorded from a phone, but the voice is unmistakable. The defendant, laughing, bragging. His tone dripping with the same arrogance he tried so hard to mask today. "And the guy is desperate," his recorded voice says. "I can drag this out for months, maybe years. People like him break if you press hard enough. Trust me. I know how to crush these small fry." A gasp rips through the room. The defendant pales, his body folding inward as if the words physically struck him. He stares at the screen, horrified at hearing himself in a version so unfiltered, so honest, so exposed. The video continues. "I will change the invoices, adjust the numbers. He will not fight back. They never do." The plaintiff closes his eyes, emotion tightening his features. This is the confirmation he feared and needed. Judy leans back in her chair, expression unreadable, but her silence speaks volumes. The defendant scrambles for words. It was taken out of context. I was joking. I did not mean." "You meant exactly what you said," Judy interrupts, her voice colder than the room itself. "And you said it with pride." The bailiff pauses the video on the defendant's smiling face, frozen in arrogance. Judy turns to him fully. "Would you like to explain this?" He opens his mouth, but nothing comes out. Judy taps the paused image on the screen with a single finger. "Because this," she says, "is the moment your story stops being a defense and becomes the truth you have been hiding." The frozen image on the screen, the defendant smiling, bragging, unguarded, hangs over the courtroom like a storm cloud refusing to move. It stares back at him with merciless clarity, a portrait of arrogance captured in pixels. And for the first time, the man who walked in wearing confidence like a crown looks unbearably small beneath it. He shifts in his chair, shoulders caving inward, suit wrinkling under the weight of exposure. His breath turns shallow. His eyes flick from the screen to his hands, then to the floor. Anywhere except toward Judge Judy, because her gaze feels too sharp to survive. The plaintiff watches him quietly, not with triumph, not with vengeance, just the kind of heavy sadness that comes from seeing someone reveal exactly who they are. Judy lets the silence linger, long, measured, punishing. When she finally speaks, her voice is controlled and even. "Is that your voice on the recording?" The defendant licks his lips. "Your Honor, that clip, someone cut it to make me look." "Answer the question," she says. His breath catches. "Yes," he whispers. "But," Judy holds up a hand. "Then we are done inventing fictional editors," the audience murmurs. A few shake their heads. One woman folds her arms tightly, visibly disgusted. The room feels united in a single, quiet realization. They have just witnessed the truth he tried so hard to bury. The defendant opens his mouth again, voice trembling at the edges. "That was a private conversation. I never thought—" "Exactly," Judy says. "You never thought anyone would hear who you truly are." He flinches. The words hit deeper than any accusation. The plaintiff exhales, gripping his seat. A wave of emotion crosses his face. Relief, grief, exhaustion, like the release of a burden he has carried far too long. Judy continues. "Your tone in this recording is not frustration. It is not misunderstanding. It is intent. You expressed pride in manipulating him, pride in dragging this out, pride in crushing someone with fewer resources." The defendant's hands begin to shake. He clasps them tightly together, trying to control the tremor. I was exaggerating. I was just venting." Judy tilts her head. "People exaggerate about being tired, or annoyed, or overwhelmed. They do not exaggerate about forging documents and breaking small businesses." His breath stutters again. His face reddens with panic, not fury. The polished arrogance he carried in is crumbling grain by grain. The plaintiff leans forward, voice soft but firm. "Do you know how many nights I stayed up wondering if I did something wrong? All while you were telling people you could crush me?" The defendant squeezes his eyes shut, absorbing the words like blows he cannot dodge. The courtroom grows painfully still. Judy leans back, studying him with a gaze that sees past the suit, past the wealth, past the excuses. "You are unraveling," she says gently, almost sadly. "Not because of what anyone here said, but because your own words have finally caught up." He stares at her, eyes glossy with a mix of fear and shame he cannot disguise. "And now," Judy adds, "there is something you need to hear." The defendant's head lifts, fragile, expectant, terrified. Judy reaches beneath the bench and pulls out a thin file he did not know existed. "You whispered earlier that this was not what it looked like," she says. "Let me show you exactly what it looks like." Do you think remorse should ever erase guilt, or does justice demand accountability no matter what? The thin file in Judy's hand looks harmless, almost delicate, yet the defendant watches it as though it were a lit fuse counting down in front of him. His shoulders hunch inward, his confidence hollowed out, leaving only the fragile shell of a man who once walked in believing nothing could touch him. Judy taps the cover lightly. Just once. The sound is soft, but the tension snaps tight around it. Earlier, she says, you whispered that this is not what it looks like. Her voice is controlled, almost quiet enough to lull, until the next sentence cuts through the air like a blade. Let us test that theory. The defendant swallows loudly. Your Honor, I never meant for any of this to— You meant every word on that recording, Judy replies, not looking up yet. And now we will see whether you also meant what is in here. She opens the file. The plaintiff leans forward unconsciously, fingers wrapped around the edge of his seat as if bracing for impact. The audience follows his lead, silent, leaning, waiting. Inside the file is a printout. A plain sheet of paper, a screenshot, a message thread. The defendant's face drains of color. Judy places the paper flat on the desk, adjusting it so he cannot avoid it. This message was submitted anonymously, she says. Someone you contacted recently. Someone you did not treat well. He stiffens. His breathing turns harsh, uneven. Judy reads the first line aloud. Do not worry about the designer. If he gets loud, I can bury him in paperwork. He'll fold. The plaintiff's eyes widen. The defendant's close. He whispers, This is not fair. Judy raises an eyebrow. Fair. She slides the paper slightly closer. You spoke about burying someone who trusted you. That is not business strategy. That is cruelty. He shakes his head frantically. I was frustrated. I did not mean— You meant every word, she says again, but softer this time, almost sorrowful. The defendant's breathing grows ragged. He presses his hand against his forehead, suddenly aware of how much of himself has been exposed. His suit feels too tight, his collar strangling. His arrogance, the armor he relied on, has rusted away, leaving him exposed to the cold air of consequence. The plaintiff watches him with a trembling mix of vindication and pain. Why? He asks quietly. I did the work. I changed everything you asked. Why did you want to crush me? The defendant opens his mouth, but no words form. He tries again, still nothing. His voice finally cracks, thin as paper. I do not know. But Judy knows. So does the plaintiff. So does the room. Because sometimes ego becomes its own compass, pointing not toward truth, but toward domination. Judy leans in slightly. Her voice lowers to a controlled murmur that somehow fills the room. You built a world where no one could challenge you, where you confuse intimidation with success. And now, her eyes meet his. Your world is collapsing. The defendant looks at her, eyes wet, voice shaking, facade shattered. Your Honor, I did not think it would go this far. It always goes this far, Judy says. That is the danger of believing you are untouchable. He stares back, broken in a way he cannot hide. Judy slides one last printed message from the file, a screenshot the defendant has not seen, and says, This, Mr. Carter, is the part you will not be able to talk your way out of. Judy holds the final screenshot between two fingers, lightly, almost delicately, yet the room feels the weight of it like a looming collapse. She doesn't reveal it right away. She lets the silence build, layer by layer, until even the cameras seem to draw closer, hungry for the moment the truth breaks open. The defendant watches her hand with dread widening his pupils. His palms press flat against the desk, knuckles white. The man who once entered as a pillar of confidence now clings to the furniture like it's the only thing keeping him upright. Judy lays the screenshot face down on the bench and looks at him. Before I turn this over, she says quietly, is there anything you wish to say? He swallows once, twice. The words come out strangled. I've said everything. No, Judy replies. You've avoided everything. The plaintiff shifts slightly, bracing himself. He knows what's coming, not the content, but the truth of it, the emotional impact. The final layer being peeled back from a man who worked so hard to hide behind his wealth. Judy turns the screenshot over. The defendant closes his eyes, like someone bracing for a punch they know they deserve. The message is short, cruel, unmistakably his. If he complains again, I'll ruin him. People like him don't matter. They're replaceable. The plaintiff gasps softly, hurt, raw, immediate. The defendant opens his eyes at the sound, and the expression he sees on the plaintiff's face shatters whatever defense he had left. Shame ripples through him, visible and uncontrollable. He whispers, I didn't mean... Judy cuts him off. You keep saying that, but every piece of evidence says otherwise. The room holds its breath. The defendant's voice trembles. Your Honor, that message wasn't serious. I was angry. His chest rises and falls too quickly, like he's struggling to keep himself from falling apart entirely. I never planned to actually hurt him. It was just words. Judy's gaze is steady. Words are choices, and yours were designed to strip a man of dignity. The plaintiff finally speaks, voice cracking with a pain he fought hard to hide. Replaceable? You think I'm replaceable? He stands, not in anger, but in anguish. I put my heart into the work you asked for. I did everything right, and you looked at me like I was... nothing. The defendant's face collapses inward. I'm sorry, he whispers. I was wrong. The apology lands in the room without weight. Too late, too shallow, too reactive. Judy leans back in her chair, watching him with a quiet understanding that feels more devastating than anger. You didn't just mistreat him, she says. You built your identity on stepping on people you assumed wouldn't fight back. The defendant drops his gaze, overwhelmed by a truth he never planned to face. His actions weren't a mistake. They were a pattern. And here, Judy adds, tapping the screenshot, is the proof of who you chose to be. The defendant's voice breaks. I don't want to be that person. But you were, she replies. Silence, deep, heavy. A silence so complete it becomes a mirror, forcing him to see himself clearly for the first time. Then Judy reaches down, pulls out a second file he did not know existed, and says, and unfortunately for you, this isn't the only time you've done it. The second file lands on the bench with a soft, devastating thump, the kind of sound that announces not just new evidence, but a new truth. The defendant's breath catches, his shoulders curling inward like a man bracing for an avalanche he knows he set in motion. Judy doesn't open the file immediately. She waits, and the courtroom waits with her. The plaintiff watches the defendant closely, and for the first time, there is no fear in his eyes, only the painful clarity of someone witnessing the full scope of what was done to him. The humanity in his expression deepens the silence. The defendant manages a whisper. Another file? What is that? Judy folds her hands atop the unopened folder. It's a reminder, she says gently, that patterns do not form by accident. His face twists. Fear, guilt, disbelief, all tangled into a single trembling expression. Your Honor, please. I can explain anything you think that is. I'm sure you can try, Judy replies, but explanations lose power when they arrive after the truth. The plaintiff flinches softly, absorbing the weight of that line. He looks down at his hands, steady now, no longer shaking, because the truth is finally carrying some of the burden he held alone. Judy opens the file. It's thin, but every page is a quiet explosion. She lifts the first sheet, a complaint letter from 2 years ago. Same language, same tactics, same entitlement. The defendant's jaw falls open. That? Someone manufactured that. I don't even remember. That, Judy says, is part of the problem. She lays down the second page. A review from another small business owner describing the same manipulation, the same refusal to pay, the same threats when pushed. The defendant presses both hands against his face. His voice breaks apart. No, I'm not. You're twisting this. These people were incompetent. I was the victim of bad work. Judy's voice remains calm, but no softness remains. Victims do not forge receipts. Victims do not brag about crushing people. Victims do not leave trails of intimidation behind them. Every word sinks into him like slow, heavy drops of truth. The plaintiff takes a shaky breath. I thought I was alone, he says quietly. I thought I was the only one you treated like this. Those words hit harder than any evidence. The defendant lowers his hands, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice hoarse. I didn't think anyone would actually get hurt. I thought... He stops, choking on the rest. He doesn't finish the sentence because the truth is already written on his face. He did think people would get hurt. He just didn't think anyone would ever hold him accountable. Judy studies him, not with disgust, but with something deeper, heavier. A kind of sorrow reserved for people who lose their way because they never believed they needed one. You built a life, she says slowly, on the assumption that your power meant other people's voices didn't matter. But power is not protection, it's responsibility. The defendant's shoulders sag. His eyes drift toward the plaintiff, pleading, apologetic, broken. But the plaintiff cannot meet his gaze, because sometimes the damage is too deep to be met with eye contact. Judy closes the second file softly. This is not about one mistake, she says. It is about a pattern you have refused to see. And now, her voice narrows, we will deal with the consequences of that pattern. The defendant's breath quivers, his collapse complete. Judy nods to the bailiff, who brings forward one final envelope, sealed, heavy, and she says, "This is the part where we talk about everyone you thought would never speak up." The sealed envelope lands in Judy's hand with a soft, papery sigh, a deceptively gentle sound that sends a visible shiver through the defendant. He stares at it as if it contains the sum of every decision he ever made, every corner he ever cut, every person he ever stepped on. And, in a way, it does. Judy studies the envelope without opening it. The tension circles the room like a slow-moving storm, pressing down on every breath. No one speaks, not the plaintiff, not the audience, not even the bailiff. The only sound is the faint hum of the overhead lights, steady and indifferent. Finally, Judy looks up. Her voice is quiet, but its weight lands like a verdict already half-spoken. This envelope, she says, contains statements from people who never filed lawsuits, never pursued complaints, and never believed they had the power to stand up to someone like you. The defendant's throat works, a tremble climbing up his neck. He whispers, "How many statements?" Judy lets the silence answer for her. He closes his eyes, breath stuttering. The room feels colder, heavier, as if the walls themselves are bearing witness. The plaintiff watches him with a somber expression. "I didn't want this," he murmurs. "I just wanted to be treated fairly." The defendant opens his eyes, the guilt raw, unguarded. "I know," he whispers. "I know you did." Judy breaks the seal. The sound is small, but it slices through the room like a blade. She pulls out the first page. A woman's name, her statement, her fear, her experience mirroring the plaintiff's almost exactly. Judy reads a line aloud. "I didn't speak up because he told me no one would believe someone like me over someone like him." The defendant flinches hard, his hand covering his mouth. His eyes water, not from shock, but from recognition. Somewhere inside, he remembers saying those words. He remembers the tone, the moment, the power. Judy lifts the second statement, the third, the fourth. Each story different in circumstance, identical in harm. The defendant breaks. His shoulders fold inward. His fingers clutch the edge of the desk like a man drowning in the weight of himself. His voice cracks open. I didn't think they'd remember. I didn't think..." He stops, unable to finish the sentence because the truth is now too loud to hide behind. Judy's gaze softens, but not with forgiveness, with gravity. With the quiet, devastating understanding of someone who has spent a lifetime watching people damage others without realizing they were damaging themselves too. "You kept telling yourself these were small things," she says, "minor inconveniences, business tactics. But to each of these people, you were the storm they had to survive." The plaintiff nods slowly, emotion tightening his voice. "You made me doubt myself every single day." The defendant shakes his head, tears slipping down his face. "I never meant..." "You never stopped," Judy replies. Silence spreads like a shadow across the room. The defendant finally looks at the plaintiff. No arrogance, no mask, just a man staring directly into the wreckage he created. "I wish I could take it back," he whispers. The plaintiff hesitates, His eyes soften for a moment, just a moment, before the pain hardens the edges again. "Some things," he says quietly, "you don't get to take back." Judy gathers the statements into a single stack, a tangible symbol of the weight he has never carried until now. She sets the stack down and says, "And now, we move to consequences, the ones you spent years believing would never reach you." The stack of statements sits on the bench like a monument, a tower of truth built from voices the defendant once dismissed. He stares at it with red-rimmed eyes, breathing shallowly, his entire posture caved in. But then, something shifts. A last flicker of the old arrogance rises in him, weak, desperate, but stubborn enough to claw its way to the surface. He straightens, not fully, just enough to mimic the man he used to be, the man he wishes he still was. "Your Honor," he begins, voice trembling but trying desperately to hold form, "I've listened to everything. I've heard every accusation, and I accept responsibility, but not for their version of events." Judy tilts her head slightly. The audience stills, sensing that final familiar twist of ego. He pushes on, words stumbling over themselves. "I made mistakes, yes. I was harsh. I was impatient. But these people, they're exaggerating. They took advantage of my success. They misinterpreted my intentions. I never wanted to hurt anyone." The plaintiff's eyes widen, not in surprise, but in disappointment, the kind that sinks deep. Judy does not move. She just watches him. The way a lighthouse watches a storm hitting the same rocks over and over again. The defendant continues, voice cracking under its own weight. "I built my businesses from the ground up. No help, no shortcuts. I had to be tough to survive. I had to protect myself. And sometimes, people mistake strength for cruelty." He gestures helplessly at the stack of statements. "These people didn't understand me. They twisted my discipline into malice. They wanted me to fail." Judy finally speaks. "I'm going to stop you right there." He freezes, mid-breath. "Everything you just said," she continues, "was an attempt to rewrite your own story. One last time, one last performance, and it was not convincing." His face crumples. The performance collapses in on itself. "You do not get to label the people you hurt as misunderstandings," she says, voice calm but edged with a quiet ache. "You do not get to call their pain a misinterpretation." She gestures toward the plaintiff. "You do not get to redefine him just because you do not like what the truth says about you." The defendant's eyes lower again, tears gathering but unshed. He whispers, "I'm trying." "And yet," Judy replies softly, "you're still trying to protect yourself first." The plaintiff lets out a shaky breath, part release, part heartbreak. For a moment, the room feels unbearably human. Not dramatic, not explosive, just heavy with the realization that some people only reach for honesty once they've run out of lies. The defendant collapses back into his chair, the last thread of ego snapping clean. His hands tremble in his lap. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispers. Judy studies him for a long moment, not as a judge, not as a critic, but as someone who has seen people crack under the weight of their own choices. "You don't fix it," she says gently. "You face it." A single tear falls down his cheek. He does not wipe it away. Judy turns to the plaintiff, her voice steady. "He's had his say. Now it's time for the truth that matters most." Before the verdict arrives, ask yourself, can anyone truly change? Or do people just get better at hiding who they are? The courtroom holds its breath as Judge Judy turns her full attention to the plaintiff. The shift is subtle, but powerful, like the beam of a lighthouse redirecting to illuminate what truly matters. For the first time since the case began, the defendant is no longer the center of the storm. Truth is, the plaintiff stands slowly. His hands tremble, not from fear now, but from the emotional weight of finally being heard. He clears his throat, eyes glossy. "When he refused to pay me," he says softly, "I thought maybe I'd failed. I thought maybe I wasn't good enough. But hearing all this, seeing all this, I realize I wasn't the problem." His voice breaks, but he keeps speaking. "I just wanted my work respected. I wanted to be treated like a person, not an obstacle." The defendant bows his head. The words cut through him with surgical precision, not angry words, not vengeful ones, but truthful ones, the kind that leave nowhere to run. Judy nods gently to the plaintiff. "You may sit." He does, exhaling shakily. Judy folds her hands, her expression shifting into something resolute and immovable. "This court," she begins, "has spent the last hour listening to a story built on arrogance, manipulation, and calculated harm. A story crafted by a man who believed money insulated him from consequence." She turns to the defendant. "You thought your status protected you. You thought your reputation excused you. You thought people were too small to fight back." He flinches at every line. Not dramatically, just visibly enough to reveal what remains of his ego dissolving in real time. "But today," Judy continues, "you learned something you should have known all along. Power is not a shield. It is a responsibility." The room stills. No one shifts. No one whispers. It is the kind of silence that makes a verdict feel like a heartbeat shared by everyone present. "In this case," she says, "I find in favor of the plaintiff." The words are clear, final, undeniable. The plaintiff shuts his eyes, a breath of relief escaping like air from a wound finally closing. Emotion trembles across his face, exhaustion, gratitude, validation. The defendant lowers his head into his hands, absorbing the blow. Not a legal blow, a moral one. Judy isn't finished. "Furthermore," she continues, "your behavior will be documented and forwarded to the appropriate channels and producers. This pattern cannot continue unchecked." The defendant's shoulders collapse. He knows what that means. His carefully curated public image, pristine, polished, powerful, has finally met a truth too heavy to conceal. "And one more thing," Judy adds, her voice softening but gaining gravity. "You owe him not just the money you withheld, not just the damages you caused, but a change in who you are when no one is watching." She lets the words sink in. Deep, irrevocable. The plaintiff meets her gaze, gratitude warming the edges of his exhaustion. The defendant does not look up. He cannot. Judy lifts the gavel. This court is adjourned. The sound rings out, sharp, echoing, absolute. As the courtroom begins to move, the camera lingers on the defendant. His suit still looks expensive, but the man inside it looks entirely undone. And in the quiet that follows, one truth settles like dust after a storm. Arrogance always collapses under truth.